hockey fans. Welcome to the Across the Pond Hockey Podcast YouTube channel. If it's your first time here and you'd like to support us, please hit that subscribe button and that like button. It goes a long way in helping us develop the program. Before we get to tonight's episode, I have to take a minute to thank our wonderful sponsors, starting with the China Hockey Group. The China Hockey Group is a family-oriented group of ice hockey leagues, training programs, and community initiatives geared towards developing hockey in Southeast Asia. From their incredible Junior Tigers program all the way up to the CIHL, which is Hong Kong's elite full-contact ice hockey league, they have a program suitable for players of all ages and abilities. You can also stop by the Warrior Bauer Hockey Shop in Central for all your equipment needs and skate sharpening. Check out their website for more information at ChinaHockeyGroup.com. That's ChinaHockeyGroup.com. Next, we have our friends at Accessory House Global. If you're like me and your headphones look like this, it's time to head to AccessoryHouseGlobal.com for any accessories you need for your headphones. From cables to carrying cases to new ear pads, they carry products for all the biggest brands. Head to their website at AccessoryHouseGlobal.com. Use the promo code ATP20 for 20% off your purchase. That's AccessoryHouseGlobal.com. Next, we have our pals over at Wheel Hub Asia. These guys are committed to building community and bringing accessibility to inline hockey players across Southeast Asia. They're heading into the year 2 of Hong Kong's newest inline league, 3 Inline. You can head to their website for all of your inline hockey needs at wheelhubasia.com. Enter discount code ATP10 for 10% off your purchase. That's wheelhubasia.com. Next, we have our friends at Yardley Brothers Craft Brewery. Folks, if you're a craft brew fan and you're in Hong Kong, then you absolutely have to check out Yardley Brothers' incredible selection of award-winning brews. You can head to the Beer Shack on Llama Island or the Yardley Brothers Cafe and Bistro at 62 Peel Street in Central. If you can't get out of the house, no problem. Just head to their website, yardleybrothers.hk, and you can get their delicious products delivered right to your door. That's yardleybrothers.hk. Last but not least, a huge thank you to Mr. Paul McLean at Sunset Studio in Kennedy Town for always making the podcast sound great. If you're looking for a place to jam with your band or record a new song, check them out on Instagram at sunset_studio_HK. That's sunset_studio_HK. Folks, the websites and description will be in the description. All the discount codes will be there for you. Please check them out and support our wonderful sponsors.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about from the chapter When the Going Gets Rough, you talked about the names on the jerseys being taken away.
Right.
I know you've always been vocal about, sticking up for what you believed in as a referee and all the turmoil that happened with the strikes and all the things that you've helped implement in the game. Was that one of the things you were for and that you were fighting for? Or was that something that you had nothing to do with? Because I know you mentioned it takes away kind of your personality, but also it puts the onus on you as an official and not a human. Like where do you stand on that decision?
I think looking back at it, we had just gone through a nasty strike. There were replacement officials that carried on in our stead that ultimately helped us because there were the players were very frustrated with the quality that they were receiving and the lack of protection that they felt from a safety perspective. But the name, the identity of an official, I think, is important in the sense that, and here's a good example. Gary Bettman decided that he was going to take our names off the jerseys at the start of that very next year.
Okay.
Gary said it was because he didn't want the focus on the official and the abuse. He thought it would cut down the abuse. I don't buy that. I don't agree with that. Nonetheless, he's the boss. He can do whatever he wants.
Mm-hmm.
However, whenever, and I was given the option as the most senior official to pick a number, and I said, okay, there's no 1 and there's no 99. Give me number 2. So I took 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever I was asked by media, they said, why did you pick number 2? I said, because my wife is number 1.
Yeah, I like that.
Smart
answer.
husband. Smart
Very,
husband. Yeah.
very smart
Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
So Shane Doan, captain of Arizona, came to me one game before the opening puck drop, and he said, "What's the name of your referee partner?" I said, "Why? Do you have a problem with him?" He said, "Oh, no. I like to call the guys by name, and I don't know any of these guys now. They've got numbers on their back. I don't know who they are." So that relationship, and Shane was a very intelligent captain, great guy. I love him. But that was something that the identity of the official was lost. It was like vanilla. But
Right.
however, whenever there was a call that the fans didn't like in a game that I was working when we went into the 2-referee system, and my partner would call the penalty, the fans, not knowing who he was, would chant "Fraser sucks."
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't say number 2 sucks.
That's
they
right.
knew who I was.
Yeah.
So identity, recognition, I think is important in the ability, not for ego, but for the official to continue to develop those kinds of relationships that are fruitful within the game.
That's a great answer. Do you believe that instant replays, where it's going right now, the amount of instant replays that we have, is there a line for you that shouldn't be crossed?
Well, I encouraged the video review process when it came in, and I felt that it was going to prove me right 99% of the time.
Yeah.
That sounds cocky, but
yeah,
we see the game at a different level. We see it slower.
Mm-hmm.
I developed a positioning philosophy that was adopted by Canadian hockey. You probably were brought up on it
Mm-hmm.
in the 80s. The piston and those sorts of terminologies.
Yeah.
I designed it because I was too small to see over and around players. And I wanted to be in the perfect position or the optimum position,
right,
unobstructed, in advance of the players getting there. So that kind of positioning philosophy is really important to be in the right place at the right time to give the best judgment you can.
Yeah.
And you alluded earlier, definitely we're going to make mistakes, but that's part of the human end. So once we had replay, I thought, and scoring of goals is how games are won and lost.
Mm-hmm.
There was a growth period because in certain rinks, there wasn't a standardized location where they would put that camera shooting down at the net. Mm-hmm. I had a playoff game. Toronto Maple Leafs were playing in Pittsburgh. I had a play where I saw from my position, I saw a shot being taken. It hit the one goal post. It was going across the line, on the line flat. It flipped up on its edge, curled at the middle of the line. It curled. So I saw white between the goal line, inside of the goal line, and the puck. With it up on its edge, it then flopped back down and went out the other side. I signaled a goal.
Mm-hmm.
This was the first year of video review. We went to video review. Charlie Banfield was the supervisor. Charlie from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy, good friend. We started in the league together. He was up in the booth, and they looked and they looked and they looked. He said, "Kerry, I can't help you because the camera was shooting straight down on the crossbar. We had no angle and couldn't tell." So the call came back to me on the ice, and I had signaled a goal, and it was a goal. Pat Quinn was the coach.
Yeah.
He said, "Fraser screwed us again." Well, the next day, they had a replay from an ESPN handheld cameraman shooting over my shoulder. They enhanced it on SportsCenter. It did exactly what I said it did. It hit the post, went across flat, flipped up. There's the goal, back down, and out the other side.
Yeah.
So our training is such that we need to see everything back then before a replay. We wanted to see everything. Now, there's a safety net upstairs. I think it's overused. I think too much officiating is being done in Toronto in that room. And the officials are, how do I say this kindly? They're relying too heavily on the safety net, they're not going and attacking the net. They're standing back deep in the corner. They're also standing at the trapezoid line oftentimes. If you think about it, that is Death Valley for a referee. You're going to get hit with the puck, but even more so, you're going to be in the line of where players are going to battle for the puck. That's player-occupied territory, and they're going to converge on you from both sides. And officials are going like this for their safety. There needs to be some coaching and some common sense. Direction. They need to want to see everything, and just have the video review there to prove them right.
Yeah, well, that's something that, you know, you have to really pride yourself on. Like I often challenge myself to never get hit with a puck. Positioning wise, like I learned by watching guys like you, not always having to be by the book. Sometimes you got to anticipate where the play's going and see something that maybe other people aren't going to see to get yourself in the right position to make a call. But that's your proudest moment. You're like, I was in the right place. I was doing exactly what I was trained to do and what my instincts, you know, brought me to in this moment. And you made the right call. So, I mean, things like that are just, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Chris, I used to challenge myself. I was a pretty good skater. So in the early 80s, the Edmonton Oilers were just an awesome team. And they were all those young guns. They were fast. They had a power play situation where Paul Coffey would get the puck behind the net. They would put Messier at their blue line with his stick over the blue line. We had a red line, center line offside pass situation back then in the rules. And then they'd have another guy, Gretz, in the middle at the far blue line. So when Coffey came, and I would go as a referee as deep as the deepest forechecker on a penalty kill, I would see Coffey get the puck behind the net. He'd press down on his stick. His body language is telling me, I know all of the outlets that he has on the ice. I see that. I take little pictures with my eyes. I know where his outlets are. I know where the attackers are and potential foul. As soon as he pressed down on that stick, and I know it's going, he's going to release it, and I know where it's going, I am already in motion. I'm already moving, and I'm chasing the play. The pass to Messier at the blue line with his stick over the blue line was one-touch pass tipped to the far blue line, where maybe Glenn Anderson was standing. And if I stood there watching that Coffey pass, I'm flat-footed. There's no way I'm going to get to that end zone. I got a linesman going in to make a ruling if there's a goal. So that was my challenge. I would see it in advance. I would know where it's going. I would attack it. I put a little sort of challenge to myself. When there was a play at the goal line and with one referee and I'm chasing the play, I want to be on that goal line by the time the puck is shot at the net. Fortunately, I was a pretty good skater. But those are the thought processes that are going through your mind as a referee. It's not just all of a sudden something happens and you go, oh, wow, what was that? You got to see it in advance. You really do.
And I don't know if people appreciate how difficult it was in the three-man system. I mean, as a sole referee, I mean, 2 or 3 turnovers in the neutral zone and you're done. I mean, your legs are, you know, you're dragging your butt down the ice. And I mean, I remember. Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I remember like my first time doing like a midget AAA game, and there's a few turnovers and you're gassed. And I never got to ref in the 4-man system until I came over to Asia, because back home at the time we were still using the 3-man system. So that leads me to my next question about some rule changes and things that happened. Were you happy about the 2-man, 2 referee system being implemented?
Yes, and when I did the Olympics in Nagano, Japan in '98, there was no red line utilized for offside pass.
Right.
So 1 referee, 2 linesmen, you're chasing the play. Nobody can skate as fast as a hard pass. So the other thing, so we changed to that stretch out pass, which certainly you needed an extra body in a different position. The other thing that was really important to move into that 2 referee system was that Gary Bettman was pleading with us to try and get rid of the clutch and grab and the hooks and the holds. The game was being, dominated by unskilled players doing unskilled acts that we allowed on the skilled players. Containment. You'd hear skate by a bench. You'd hear a coach's holler, hold them up, hold them up. So that was a hook, a water ski. We tried unsuccessfully, where we'd start the season firm on it, but players knew that it would eventually go back the way it was, and that did. So if you think about this, Chris, let's think about broadcasting a game. You've got one camera, and that one camera is following the play all the time. So as that camera follows the play, all you're doing is looking through the backs of the players. You're not seeing a foul from the front. You're not seeing the hook, the touch. You're not seeing the skills that are taking place or the foul. So put a second camera on the front view, which is usually the best view, looking into a play.
Yeah.
And that's what we accomplished with the 2-referee system. Now, there were certainly some bugs that had to be worked out of that system. We brought in a whole bunch of guys from the American Hockey League that were inexperienced at the NHL level pretty much. They wanted to be in charge because they were in their 1 referee, 2 linesman system. They wanted to be recognized as the guy in charge sometimes. There was a little battle of who's going to make the calls. Not so much from the veterans, but from the younger officials. So we had to work those kinks out. The game was faster for them. So things were happening more quickly than they were used to. They had to adjust to that speed of the game. And then the game got really much faster because of after the first lockout in 2004. We came back in 2005. There was the no hook, no touch. Game increased speed exponentially with the lack of restraint that was allowed to happen previously. So all those things put together, we needed 2 referees and the 2 linesman system to be effective on the ice. The challenge was to mesh our judgment so that when it happened at one end, the players had the confidence to know that it would be called at that end as much as the other end. The one thing that used to bug me and drive me crazy was if I was looking at a play from 15 feet and I'm on that play, and it's pretty much my call to make, and I deem it not to be a penalty, I might even shake my head or give a verbal command, nothing there, play on. And then 10 seconds later, a whistle blows with a guy 100 feet away with his arm up.
It's the worst.
I would have conversations with my partners in a sort of a pregame, and this is how it would go. I'm going to take you inside the locker room right now, the referee's room. I'd say, okay, guys, we got 2 teams playing tonight. This is what I've got the press notes. This is what they did in the past. We got one guy on the bubble here. If he gets an instigator penalty, he's going to get a game misconduct and a 1-game suspension. So let's make sure if there's a fight and he's in, he earns it if he is the instigator. And now, ref partner, I trust your judgment. You've got really good judgment. When you're looking at a play and you're 15 feet from it, I'm going to give you that call. That's your call to make, and I'm going to trust you. Unless I see from a long distance that you've got turned, you're not looking at it, something happened that prevented you from calling an obvious penalty, and then I'll get involved.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm going to leave it to you. On the other hand, at my end, my judgment isn't all that bad either. And I would expect that if I'm looking at something from 15 feet, unless it's I blink or I'm turned around or whatever, I expect you to give me that call.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that you got to have a cohesion. You got to have like some type of relationship with this other referee, because those things are not easily established. And, this happened to me recently where I even yelled at the players, "It's good, guys. Good battle. Move on." And the other referee's arm was up. And I mean, he felt terrible after the game. He's like, you stepped on your toes. And he's like, I thought your back was turned a little bit. I thought you didn't see it. And,
right.
I'm sure like developing, relationships with people over time, and which you were able to accomplish. I mean, you can kind of have that relationship with the other guy on the ice.
Chris, there were 2 times that I assessed penalties or was about to, and took them away.
Took them away.
I took them away.
Okay.
First one was in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Terry Murray was coaching the LA Kings. A player attacking the LA goal skates over the blue line with the puck. He's 10 plus feet inside the zone with the puck on his stick, and he gets tripped.
Mhm.
And I raised my arm to call a tripping penalty. As I raised my arm to call the tripping penalty, a whistle blew at the blue line. I went to the linesman. I said, "What happened?" He said, "It was offside at the blue line." And I was slow with the whistle.
Oh,
slow. The
okay.
guy skated 10, 15 feet into the zone with a puck. Now, the play's dead at the blue line.
Yeah.
Everybody, 20,000 people in the Staples Arena in LA saw me call a penalty on an obvious trip.
Mm.
I went to Terry Murray, the coach of the LA Kings. I said, "Terry, I'm not calling that penalty." I said it was offside at the blue line. The linesman missed his mouth with the whistle. It was delayed. It was slow. And plays dead.
Yeah.
Offside at the blue line. He said, "You can't do that." I said, "I just did." I said, "You know, in football,
Yeah.
when they throw the flag and they say it's an errant flag," I said, "That was an errant arm."
Yeah.
So I now had to go and flip on the mic, announce, because the media, the broadcasters see it. I gave an explanation. Play offside at the blue line. There was no penalty on the play. Boom. And I said to the linesman, "Drop the puck. Let's go. Get it moving quick."
Absolutely.
The other time, this one was bizarre. It was a game towards the end of the season, and it was in Dallas. And St. Louis Blues were playing. I had a young French referee with me. Didn't speak English very well. He was a call up, and I went through the process and I said, "Okay, we got this guy for St. Louis. He's on the bubble. If he gets an instigator, he's out of the game and he's got a 1-game suspension." Just towards 30 seconds left in the first period, we had a fight break and another breakout simultaneously. So we have two fights going at the same time.
Mhm.
I'm on the first one, and my partner's on the second one. We converge at the referee's crease to assess the penalties. And I said, "What have you got?" He said, "That guy there, he's got the instigator." I said, "That guy for St. Louis is the guy that is on the bubble, and he's going to be ejected, and he's got a 1-game set. Are you sure?" Oh yeah, for sure." It didn't sit right with me, but we assessed the penalties.
Yeah.
Now we go into the dressing room, and I said to my partner, I said, "Would you demonstrate to me what took place in that play?" He said, "Yeah, sure." He says, the St. Louis guy pushed the one guy, the other guy pushed him back. They push, and then the St. Louis dropped his gloves, and the other guy dropped his gloves, and they fight. I said,
Where's
"That's
the
not an
instigator?
instigator."
Yeah.
I said, "That's like, simultaneous combustion."
Yeah.
He went, "Oh." Now we have a phone in the room that's linked directly to Toronto, the red phone. I picked it up.
Mhm.
I got Mike Murphy on the line. I said, "Mike, listen, we got a problem here." I said, "I think it was just a difficulty in language between
Mhm.
French and English, because I wasn't going to throw my guy under the bus."
Of
And I
course.
said, "But there's no way that should have been a instigator penalty." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I've already had both general managers call me and want to know how that was an instigator."
Right.
He said, "What are you going to do? What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to fix this." I said, "I would like to call both GMs over, get them over to my dressing room. I'm going to send word to tell the guy to get dressed again. We're going to thank God they didn't score on it. 30 seconds because they got an extra minor, right?
Right.
For the
Yeah.
instigator. They haven't scored on it. Let's pull it the minute and 30 left on the clock.
Wow.
We take it off the clock, and he's going to play, and it's 5 minutes each for fighting, and that's it." He said, "Good idea."
Wow.
And that's what happened. 30 seconds
30 seconds into a penalty, you
been
took it off the
served,
board. That is
took it
awesome.
away, and I
Yeah.
made an announcement so that the media knew what the heck
Yeah.
was going on.
That is incredible. I mean, that's
Really unorthodox.
never heard
Big
of
time
anything like
unorthodox.
that, but I mean, every once in a while, common sense has to take over, right?
Got
So,
it right.
were there any other rules that you wish were still around in the league, that things that aren't anymore? Were there any rule changes that you were like, oh, I wish we didn't do that?
Well, certainly and it was eliminated. The 1 year it was put in was the toe in the crease. I mean, oh my God!
I thought you
disaster.
might go there.
Oh, what a disaster!
Yeah,
and
that ruined a few good hockey games, didn't it?
Oh, it was terrible. And you know, the last game of the Stanley Cup final that year with Buffalo and Dallas with Brett Hull,
Mhm.
you know, he didn't have his toe in the crease. He had that big tree of a leg. Was right in the middle of the crease.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out so well. They had to do some damage control on that one.
Yeah, definitely not one of my favorites either. The other one I wanted to ask you about is the puck in the crowd, puck over the glass penalties. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are, responsible for making a judgment call on so many other things that are going on in the ice. Was it really important that rule be established? Was there a problem with people purposely shooting the pucks over the ice? Like, because to me, and I remember Don Cherry would harp about this all the time. It's going to cost a team a playoff game. It's going to cost them in overtime, especially when someone's already shorthanded and they're just desperate to get the puck out and it's rolling and it goes over the glass. What are your overall thoughts on that?
Well, I think there was, we had a puck that went into the crowd in Columbus, and a young person was killed.
Yes.
Tragic. The mesh went up, but I think that may have contributed in some way to that rule. Sort of a quick reaction to try and keep the puck in play beyond just putting netting up at the back end.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect of it was that it was always a judgment call when I was brought into the league.
Yeah.
And so if a player deliberately, clearly with pressure on them and a long shift, if he dumps the puck over the glass, I think my judgment would dictate that should be a penalty.
Me too.
However, if he's just trying to advance the puck up the ice, and it's misses the glass, because we had inconsistent heights of glass.
There you go.
In the early going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that now we got standard glass. It's awful high. I think that that's a penalty. The previous penalty, in the heat of a game in the late stages, there was a reluctance. If it was deliberately shot over the glass, there would be a reluctance by most referees to make that tough call.
Right.
It seemed like
to make it
when you let other things go that were maybe obvious, as we often hear, let them play in the playoffs. It's a different kind of officiating, different rule book, blah blah blah. The guys get enough criticism for it, and then this one becomes so black and white that it's an easy call.
Right. That's the good side of it, that it takes away that little bit of onus. But I would rather trust you to make the right call, to be honest. I mean, that's what you're there for. Well,
for sure. And it comes at a bad time, always in a game that can end a pretty darn good hockey game.
Absolutely.
I guess we put the onus on the players. My personal feeling is I would rather have that call to make or not make, and it's not. Let's backtrack a little bit here. Let's talk about scoring opportunities, and if the pressure is on, and we're in the late stages of a game, and even though a team is on their heels and a guy flips one, advancing it a little bit, and it's over the glass within his end zone, is the referee going to make that call? Maybe not. So it took the pressure off, maybe prevented a goal being scored with the team back on their heels on a long shift. And so there's two components here. You can argue both sides of it. I'm not usually a neutral in the middle kind of guy. My personal preference is I think I have the ability and the judgment to make that call. and the courage to make that call.
Absolutely, and I agree 100%. Are there any? You talked about the huge change, which was the biggest one in my lifetime, was the clutching and grabbing, the getting rid of the red line, trying to open the game up. So the whole idea of making a faster, more entertaining game, but that brought in a whole new plethora of problems as well, which was massive hits, massive headhunting hits. Guys weren't finding ways to slow people down. What changes are happening now, or what's something that's coming in the pipeline that we can see that's going to help correct some of these issues that have come with the speed of the game?
Well, I think there's been positive change over time since we came back from 05, and that's when it first started, and that was when the hooking and the holding were eliminated. The speed, defensemen were vulnerable when they were the tag up offside situation or the dump on the attack. Players are going full speed, and the defensemen were vulnerable to go back and get the puck. Goalies couldn't come out of the crease beyond the trapezoid to play the puck and assist their D on the attacks. So all of those things put together created some vulnerability for hits from behind on the D with a fast coming attacker, full speed ahead. So that being said, you've got the other thing that took place was the little hooks and the holds that previously were never called away from the puck. It had no bearing on the puck or the play per se, other than holding up an attacker, which had some effect, negative effect, obviously. But now that wasn't happening, little touches and little hooks and holds were being called. So players started to think, gee, if that's a penalty, I'm going to play a little more cautious. I'm not going to body check as much. So what developed was a directive that let's not overreact to good hits, open ice hits elsewhere. That message was given a wrong approach, I believe, by the officials, that subliminally the league wanted more hits. And the players, when the horse is out of the barn and it starts to run, it snowballed, and it got bigger hits, open ice hits, higher hits. Instead of just body checking to gain possession of the puck, it was massive train wreck hits to put guys on Sports Center. And that became sort of the flavor of the time. And it was hard to pull the reins in. So we had high hits, head hits, hits from behind into the boards. I think that as a referee, and we're talking player safety here. And that's what rules are designed for, primarily. So the referees have to know the difference and have the ability to be supported when they make those kind of calls that are dangerous. Charging, high hits, players leave their feet. The leaving of the feet became accepted because the comment would be, that's just creating velocity through the check.
The follow through,
I think BS. I mean, there's no need to do that. There's no need to do that. We don't need that kind of velocity. And we don't need, when you leave your feet, everything is going up, and it's going up in this direction. So they have done a much, much better job. And they being Department of Player Safety, Georgie Peros is in charge there now. I really like George, great guy. He was a tough guy, fighter. He takes a lot of criticism for his decisions, but he's doing the best he can, and they've come an awful long way over time. And I think medically we know more now.
Of course.
And there were people, sort of the dinosaurs and Neanderthals that wanted to keep it the way it was. But we can argue about style of play, but when it becomes proven medical fact as to what can result, I think there's no argument there.
Absolutely.
Or there should not be.
The next one is the instigator rule. Are you a fan?
Yeah, you know what? Fighting is pretty much taken care of itself. And I went through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. And got to tell you, early 80s, every team had a couple of enforcers to protect their star players. Those guys usually fought each other, and a couple of times a game sometimes. But the game you can't afford as a team to have a guy on the bench that can't play, that just does one thing, one component. And their fighting has been reduced drastically. So the instigator still there. I think that it's not going to prevent anybody that would want to seek retribution. I don't think it really is, because number one, as I just said, you can't have a player on the team, on the bench, that can't play, that all they can do is fight. So from that perspective, it's there. It's still a little bit of a deterrent, maybe. If a player, and the linesmen are instructed, if a player loses his helmet during a fight, they're to get in there because they don't want the guy falling on the back of his head.
Right.
There was a fatality in Ontario and in college hockey as a result of that.
Yeah.
So it's a wise decision, I think, and it's not really a big deal because we don't have that many fights anymore. And I got to tell you, I get a real kick out of the commentators when there's a couple of fights going on at once.
Yeah.
And they're saying, we've got a brawl going on.
Yeah.
They have no idea what a brawl is. Trust me.
Yeah. You've seen a few of those.
Boy, I'll say.
The next one I want to ask you about is something you only dealt with later on in your career. It's having a microphone on you. Microphones being everywhere. And after seeing what happened to Tim Peel, Tim's a guy that I met. I actually met him in Red Story in 2001 in Digby, Nova Scotia at a golf tournament. Tim was so nice.
Right.
He actually gave me his welcome package that he got for this golf tournament. I'll never forget it. I was like 19 years old, 18 years old. And had great conversations with him. Got to meet Red Story. I followed Tim throughout his career, and he was one of the guys, because I met him and there was a personal connection, I would watch him during games and try and learn from his positioning and things like that. But when I saw what happened to him, and I mean, we all know the story. He got hit with a hot mic. It's not something you dealt with very often in your career, I'm sure. What are your thoughts on that, and like how that was handled?
Well, first of all, Tim is a friend of mine, and I was just golfing with him about 3 or 4 weeks ago up in Columbus. But I kept in touch with Tim after I retired, and Tim, there were times where he's a flamboyant guy, as you know, and he's fun, but he says things sometimes that when he laughs at himself. And, when he got caught with the mic, and you got to know, first of all, that there's mics all over trying to capture sound of the game, and you've got to be more controlled. It brings into the question, do referees make even up calls? And the answer would be yes. Every referee has done that when he feels he's made a mistake on a play. I tried not to do that because I think 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
But there are times in a game when, as a referee, and feeling that temperature and that pulse of the game, that I feel the game needs a penalty to bring the temperature down. It might be coincidental penalties. It might be, one team is taking too many liberties, and it's time. It's time to pull the reins in. They're not getting the message. But I'm not going to invent a penalty. It's got to stand. It's got to be able to stand the litmus test of a replay. And the last thing I would ever do is to say to anybody, it wasn't much, but I wanted to get him. I wanted to get that one. I mean, so I called Peelsy at the time to support him. And I said, first of all, what were you thinking, bud? Like, I mean, maybe we all have at times in a game felt the need to the game needed a penalty. for control factor,
Mhm.
but and there was no excuse. Like he just said, "Oh man, I know, I went brain dead,"
Yeah.
and there had to be, because it blew up so much, and because the media now in this day and age in everything makes such a big deal of everything that goes on, and the political correctness and the integrity and all that sort of stuff. I understand why the league did what they did. I think Tim's been taken care of appropriately in terms of his severance and all those other things. He was going to retire at the end of the season.
I know, that's the sad part, that this happened so late.
Yeah.
But
he's got to look at it. There's times when we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say,
yeah, you're right.
I own it. I own it. And he does. And now he's doing some other things, and we're playing golf together as part of a golf organization. And he had a great career, 20 years. He had a good run, and he's now, spending really quality time with his family. He's a great dad, great husband, and it was a phase of his life, just like my career was a phase of my life.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because I really did feel terrible. Like I felt like, it was just such bad timing for him in his career. But things happen. You got to be accountable. I just felt bad for him in that moment, because, like you said, we may have all had those thoughts. I'm sure like things happen and or even when games starting to get out of control, sometimes you're just like, okay, I got to get a handle on this. You just don't say those things out loud, and with mics all around, and that's what it.
So let me ask you, as a referee, has there ever been a time in a game when you've consciously decided that you're going to you're going to get a penalty? Get a penalty?
There's been times where I see games getting out of control, especially when I'm reffing over here. There's a lot of like the talent level there's a big gap sometimes, and they're the hardest games to ever ref when you got a guy who played major junior and a guy who played midget B. I mean, there's got to be consequences to things. There's so much game management going on. Sometimes the most important penalties are the ones you don't call, and other times things are getting out of hand. There's bumps and stuff after the whistles or whatever it is, and you start to feel like you need to gain control, like you said. But I've never had the feeling like I need to have a make-up call, because when I make a mistake, I'll just own up to it and be like, sorry guys, I'll do my best to get the next one.
Good for you. And that's what I would say when players would come to me and say, you blew that call.
Yeah, you owe
and
us
I'd reflect on it, and that's exactly what they said. They would say, well, you owe us one. I'd apologize. You know what? You may be right. You owe us one. And my standard answer, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Do me a favor. Please kill this thing.
Yes, exactly. So, Kerry, we've been talking for a long time. I don't want to keep you too long, but I do have a few quick questions. People always, once I told people that you were coming on the show, of course, everybody just wants me to ask about your hair, the call against the Leafs call, things that you've talked about like ad nauseum, like so many times it's not even worth bringing up anymore. But you still have the fabulous hair, I must say. But the biggest question people wanted to know: any secrets? What was your secret to keeping the hair so good?
Well, first of all, it's hereditary, and I was diagnosed with a very rare form of blood cancer in 2017, and I take 9 chemo pills a week since 2017. One of the side effects beyond fatigue could be hair loss. That hasn't happened, so touch the old block.
Yeah.
But you know what? The secret. I had a playoff game in the old Buffalo Auditorium. I hated that rink. Pucks would bounce off the glass. It was a disaster. Anyway, Boston Bruins won the playoff game 1-0. In the old Aud, we used to walk out of our dressing room by the visitors' dressing room, and we were right in with the crowd. There was no security. Fans could just wait, stand there. I walked out with my bag, and a lady got right in my face. She said, "Kerry, I got a question for you." I went, "Oh boy!" I didn't think anything happened in the game, but so I set my referee bag down. I said, "Yes, ma'am. What is it?" She said, "Listen." She said, "I've got real problem hair. You fly around that ice 100 miles an hour. You don't have a hair out of place. Never moves. What's your secret?" I said, Paul Mitchell Freeze and Shine for the heavy days. She said, great. I'm going to go buy a case of it. Thanks a lot. That was
There
it.
you have it, folks. There's the secret. The big secret of Carrie Fraser's success. Paul Mitchell, is that what it was called?
Paul Mitchell.
There you
Mitchell
go,
Freeze
folks.
and Shine was the stuff back then. It was like spraying on a helmet. And but now that I'm not officiating, they have a wonderful product called Fast Drying Sculpting Spray.
There you
Keeps
go.
it nice and light.
Well, it's working, whatever you're doing. And how are you feeling? I mean, you've been battling the rare form of cancer for 5 years now. You look amazing. Some of the
Thank
pictures
you.
and videos that you've sent me, you're doing these charity events and hiking mountains and climbing the Rockies and raising money for charities. How are you feeling, and how are you able to do all these things?
Well, I just did a 24-hour hockey marathon, the annual event we do up in Long Island. It was with Adam Graves and Stefan Matteau and Colton Orr and Eric Cairns, two tough guys. They actually, Colton told me the very first fight he had in the NHL was against Eric Cairns. And I said, how did you do? And if you look at the picture that I sent out on Twitter, you can see the size of them. They were playing in the sled hockey game with our special needs sled hockey teams. And the size of Eric Cairns, huge guy, and Colton's a big guy, but he looks like a little midget next to Eric.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I did pretty good. He said, he was a big target.
Yeah, couldn't miss. That's
man.
funny. So you look like you're feeling pretty good.
Well, I push myself, and
Yeah.
my wife gets a little angry at me sometimes because
course,
I'm like the Energizer Bunny, and
Yeah.
I've hit the wall. I got COVID, and then 3 weeks clear out of COVID. I did the mountain hikes, 30 miles in the Alberta-Montana border. It was pretty intense, and it was for cancer with other blood cancer patients. It was fantastic. But when you climb the mountain and you get to the summit and you look down, and it was a real spiritual experience to be thankful that I was able to do it. Even with what we all had, we accomplished it. We climbed the mountain. And when I was diagnosed, with this blood cancer, Mark Messier phoned me and he said, "Hey, Fraze," he said, "you never stop fighting. You never give up." And of course, I'm going to see Mark Messier this Friday along with Justin Williams. We're doing a golf charity thing that is taking place at Caves Valley in Baltimore for the Patriot Fund. A gentleman bid $60,000 to play with us.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's an overnighter, and it's going to be great. And I say to everybody, the $60,000 for the Patriot Fund, it was $59,995 that the gentleman paid to play with Mess and Justin Williams, and $5 for me. I got it to 60.
There you go. Well, I mean, this is goes back to what you said about the hockey community and how much people give back and look out for each other and help each other out. The final chapter of the book, Letting Go, and the decision to retire, obviously never an easy decision for anyone. How did you handle that? And did you make the right decision at the right time, if looking back at it now?
I think so. I could have stayed another year or so, but I'd accomplished pretty much, everything that needed to be accomplished. I think that I was 58 years old when I left the ice. I mean, I know I could still do it. Jim Gregory, the vice president of the league, who's God rest his soul, said, "Fraser, you could do this till you're 60." Probably could have, but it was time, and there were younger people coming down the pike. I selected for my referee partner in that final game, Kelly Sutherland, who I instructed at our referee school that I was part of in Calgary when he was 18 years old.
Yeah.
I looked at this kid as a young official, and I thought he's a can't miss. We got him into the Western Hockey League at that time. He started his development. It was interesting because as I looked at this young boy on the ice, he had all of the mannerisms that I had. He combed his hair the same way as I did. He was like mini me. And one of his friends confided in me that during that camp that asked him see a picture in his wallet. He didn't have a picture of his girlfriend. He had my hockey card in his wallet. So he is
That's
an
great.
outstanding. He's an outstanding referee. He just did the finals and again. So, Chris, when you do things for others, you forget about things that you might have that are seemingly important for yourself.
Yeah.
When I immediately wrote the book from retirement, to answer your question, that I needed to find my way. I needed to find out what I was going to do. The writing of the book and the marketing of the promotion of the book and the speaking and that sort of thing just fell into place. And I was recruited by TSN as a result of being on TV and doing some shows, recruiting or promoting the book. So for 3 years, I was with TSN. We had the NHL broadcast rights. I didn't make a lot of friends in my hockey community, in my officiating community, because I'm an honest, tell it like it is guy. If I refereed and made a mistake, just like you said, you admit it. You admit your mistake. You're not perfect. None of us are. Mm-hmm. So my job was to tell it like it is, but not just point out that the official was incorrect in the assessment of a penalty or his judgment. It was about educating people as to why, showing them the human side of it. And the guys, and I can understand it. Nobody likes to be criticized, especially publicly, and especially by one of your own. But it was important, and I think there was an education of fans along the way that I saw. Even when we started to write the Come On Ref blog, fans started out really critical. Fraser, you suck anyway. You blew the call in '93, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And, it was unmerciful. But again, I tried to hold that line, treat disrespect with respect. I answered their questions. I blogged back in with them, tried to explain, yes, the referee didn't make the correct call, but here's why. And we would show video. And this is his sight line. Mm-hmm. Had he had a different one, probably would have made a different decision. So I think there was positive stuff, but nonetheless, you can only control what you can control. And I had to be true because if you just send spin, you have no credibility. Right. Fans are going to say, that's regurgitating the company line. And I don't think anybody benefits from that.
I agree. And I have to say, Kelly and Wes, probably the two best officials in the game right now. Two guys that you basically groomed on the way up, seemingly. Another thing I wanted to say was the last couple of years, starting with the Come On Ref thing, we've now got in between periods, even in between whistles, we've got Dave Jackson coming on, explaining a play to the fans, to casual watchers, especially in the playoffs where everything is heightened so much. It's so nice to have these guys. Is that something that you enjoy, or something that maybe you'll become more of a part of doing, something like that?
Well, it's something that I did. We started it at TSN.
You started with, I mean, as that evolves, are you going to continue to be part of that? I guess is what I was saying.
No, and no, I don't believe so. And I'll tell you why. The league controls that. And I'll say this in all honesty. I think that Dave does a great job. He communicates well. There are times when the company, the NHL controls broadcasting. And there is sort of a direction that they would want individuals making comments to take. So there are times when the players that are on the panel, Messier with Dave Jackson, I've heard him say, "You got to be kidding me!" Like, really?
Yeah.
But they have to use their sort of softer approach to things sometimes. For me, with TSN, they wanted the hard truth, but done in such a way that it is educational as opposed to critical.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I mean, you don't want any time to be firing somebody under the bus, but also some of the things that happened might have been done. There might have been a call that a ref didn't make for good reason. There's just a game management thing, that kind of stuff, and then it can kind of backfire a little bit. So Kerry, you've been retired for a few years now. You've obviously kept really busy. What is it that's keeping you going? I know you talk a lot about your wife Kathy. You've got seven kids. I don't know how many grandkids you got. That information's hard to find, but
13
grandkids.
We just had our Jamie, our daughter, lawyer in St. Louis, and her husband just had their third little boy a couple of months ago, and that's number 13. So that is really where we're at in our life right now.
Yeah.
We have a lot of them close by us, and we go to their sporting events, and I go on the ice with hockey practices. We've got our oldest grandson just got a scholarship to play hockey at Nazareth College. He's going to be a pre-med student. Great kid. They're all great kids. And so, I was asked one time on a podcast like this, what I think my legacy will be.
Yeah.
And, the moderator was thinking, most games in the history of the NHL, blah, 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 this and that. And I said, my legacy is already written. It's in my children and in my grandchildren. That's what I'm leaving. And I truly mean that. There's nothing more important. God and family. And that's it.
And no better answer, Kerry. Before I let you go, I have a segment on the show called Overtime, where I ask you some quick one-timer questions, followed by one special question for our listeners. Would you mind sticking around for those?
Absolutely.
All right. And you're going to have a hard time with some of these, because I know how close you are to some of these players and people. So this is going to be tough for you. Okay. All right. Here we go. First one, Habs or Leafs?
I grew up a Leaf fan. Habs, the best franchise in the NHL.
Lemieux or Gretzky?
Best player I saw, Gretzky, based on more assists than the next player had total points. But Mario, shortened career, could have been as great.
Probert or Domi?
Proby. Hands down, best fighter.
Waugh or Brodeur?
Marty Brodeur. Great guy.
Orr or Lidstrom?
Bobby Orr transformed the game from the defensive position.
Claude Lemieux or Brad Marchand?
I love Claude Lemieux. I don't like the way Brad Marchand plays.
Okay, good. Yzerman or Messier?
Wow. That is a coin toss almost, but Mess, I saw, and I know you want a short answer, but I got to go with Messier.
Take your time.
And here's why. When Gretzky was traded away from Edmonton and they started disbanding the team, in 1990, Mark Messier took that team and won the Stanley Cup Finals on his back. They just snuck into the playoffs, and that guy was unbelievable. Then with the Rangers, I had the game 6 where he promised to win.
Yes.
In Jersey, at the end of the second period, I had just given Esa Tikkanen a kneeing penalty for kneeing Stéphane Richer. I said to the two linesmen, Gerard Gauthier, Pat DePuzzo in the referee's room, officials room, I said, guys, stick a fork in these Rangers. They're done. Mess came out and scored a hat trick.
Yeah.
I would never doubt him again. And then he took them to the Stanley Cup final and won in game 7. Amazing, amazing leadership, intensity. He could freeze guys with his stare. Stevie Y did it in Detroit, but on a shorter spectrum.
Yeah. I knew that would be tough because I know you have a lot of respect for Stevie Yzerman as well.
Oh, big time.
Bowman or Burns?
You got to go with Scotty. I love Pat Burns. Pat was such a gentleman. I miss him and I love him. But Scotty, with his transition through the eras, different eras, he became a different coach at different times based on the time and the talent. Look at what he did with the Russian Five in Detroit.
He transformed the game, in my opinion. Ron or Don?
I like Grapes, and Ron's a former or a fellow official, so
Yeah.
that's a kind of a coin toss too. I had arguments with Don Cherry lots of times. As a matter of fact, we almost got into a little dust up in the dressing room in Montreal in the Forum in 1989, and he was angry that I called a penalty in double overtime against Mark Hunter, and it ended up in the game-winning goal just before the second overtime period had ended. When he ran Shane Corson from behind and put his face right into the boards from behind. And it was a penalty that had to be called. Of course, back then, the old adage, let him play. It meant let him cheat. And we just about got into a dust up in the men's washroom.
I have to say, Kerry, one of my favorite Don Cherry lines of all time was when one of his Rock'em Sock'em videos in the blooper reel, when you go down on the ice and it's okay, folks, he landed on his hair. I remember that line with my brothers. We would tease at people, like, just classic stuff. So that's another.
I presented my final whistle to Don Cherry on air when I released the book from Wayne Gretzky's restaurant in Toronto, and they called me to come up the street for the intermission to talk about head hits and concussions. And I had my whistle that I presented to Grapes, and he came out and I said, listen, I want to give you this whistle. You obviously didn't want me to blow it very often, but he said, I got a place where you can stick it. He said, I got a place you can stick it. And he auctioned it off. He auctioned the whistle off for the Canadian Forces. He's a very patriotic guy.
Oh, he certainly is. Certainly is. Shootout or no shootout?
Game should end. I like the shootout.
Okay. Final question. If you could go back and referee one more game, where would it be and who would be playing and why?
It would be in Toronto. It would be the Hockey Hall of Fame alumni game.
Ooh.
With all of the greats, the year that I'm inducted into the Hall of Fame.
It better be next year.
There's a story there.
There definitely is. There's a lot of stories there. Kerry, one final quote from the book. Courage and integrity are two qualities that officials in any sport must possess. I must say that you possess those qualities greater than anyone. You are a true Hall of Famer, and we don't need to get into the reasons you're not there, because every hockey fan out there knows you should be. I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. It's truly been a blessing for me to have this chance to speak with you. And I wish you nothing but the best health and happiness in the future, and enjoy the rest of your retirement.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. You're a great orator and did a great job here. And I wish you all the best with your students and your officiating and all the good stuff that you're doing over in Asia.
Thanks a lot, Kerry. I really appreciate it. That was Across the Pond, and that's a wrap.
Thank you once again to our amazing sponsors, the China Hockey Group, AccessoryHouseGlobal.com, Wheel Hub Asia, and Yardley Brothers Craft Brewery. And of course, our head honcho here at Sunset Studio, Mr. Paul McLean. Folks, if you want to reach out, send in a question or a comment to AcrossThePondHK.com or find us on social media at AcrossThePondHK.